Good morning, everyone. My name is Tony Penny, and I am the Chief Learning Officer here at the Ronald Reagan Presidential Foundation and Institute. And I ask, in honor of all men and women in uniform, please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please be seated. Before we begin our program today, I wanted to take just a moment to recognize a few of our special guests. First, I want to recognize the family of our speaker today. I know our speaker today is joined by his wife, sons, extended family, so please join me in welcoming his family. So thank you very much. I also want to thank our partners in today's event, the team from the Butterfly Project. The team from the Butterfly Project. Thank you so much for working with us today. I'd like to recognize our friends in the Fraternity of Presidential Sites visiting today from Indiana in the Benjamin Harrison Presidential Site, Mr. Charles Hyde and Mr. Roger Hardig. Thank you for joining us today. And finally, I know we have joining us today a number of residents of the Reserve, which is the community where our speaker today lives. So thank you all for joining us today. President Reagan was very fond of freedom and often reminded us that freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. In the recent history of the world, there are a few examples that illustrate this danger more powerfully and more horrifically than the Holocaust. In 1933, when the Nazis first gained power in Germany, there were more than 9 million Jews in Europe. And by 1945, nearly 2 out of every 3 had been systematically murdered. More than 6 million people, and of those 6 million, 1.5 million were children. For many years before coming to work here at the library, I was a history teacher. I taught middle school history. And at the beginning of each year, I'd ask my students, why do we study history? Well, and I received all sorts of answers, but a favorite response that almost every class came up with is so that we don't repeat the mistakes of the past. Well, sometimes the events of our past go far beyond the realm of simple mistakes. When that happens, as it did with the Holocaust, we must be sure to tell the story over and over and over again so that each new generation realizes the dangers of losing freedom. We must never, ever forget. In 1988, President Reagan spoke at the laying of the cornerstone for what would eventually become the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, D.C. And I hope you won't mind if I share a few of his words from that occasion with you today, because I think it provides a wonderful context for our speaker. President Reagan said, "We gather here today for a solemn, profound, saddening, and yet triumphant occasion. It's an occasion that commemorates all we've lost, the irreplaceable humanity whose monstrous end will ever testify to the hellish depths of human evil. But it's an occasion that commemorates something else as well. It commemorates the seriousness of our intention as human beings, as Americans, and in the case of many here today, as Jews, to keep the memory of the 6 million fresh and enduring. We who did not go their way owe them this. We must make sure their deaths have posthumous meaning. We must make sure that from now until the end of days, all humankind stares this evil in the face, and that all humankind knows what this evil looks like and how it came to be. And when we truly know it for what it was, then and only then can we be sure that it will never come again." Some people say that evil of this degree is incomprehensible, and they say we can never understand it. He finished with, "I believe the Holocaust is comprehensible. Indeed, we must comprehend it. We have no choice. The future of mankind itself depends on it." Our speaker today, by virtue of sharing his story with all of us, does much to ensure that this generation will comprehend the evil of the Holocaust. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Jim Bachner to the stage.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good morning. Thank you for the wonderful introduction. I'm very pleased. I'm very happy and very pleased to see such a large number of friends who have come to hear me share my memories of the Holocaust here at the Reagan Library, a very special, beautiful, and important place. Thank you, the directors of education and the entire staff, for arranging this special event to remember the Holocaust at this very special place. I appreciate the opportunity to share my memories of the Holocaust with you. This is the time of the year, 73 years ago, when Allied forces defeated Nazi Germany and World War II came to an end. 3/4 of a century have passed since they opened the gates to Nazi concentration camps. The sights, the stench they had to face were beyond words. And many of the pictures, I thought they'd be going to have some pictures shown, but I don't see. Oh, well, here we go. That's my family. But you see myself there next to my father, my brother, my mother. Yes, I am still here. Now, many of the pictures shown, I'm showing some of the pictures of the moment when the Allied troops came to free us from the concentration camp. And I wanted to show, well, that's my life before. But these are the cars that we are transported in. They were built in World War II to carry 8 horses and 12 men. We were transported 100 individuals in one car. Look at the amount of windows there were to get us air, and look at the size of the car. We had enough room to just about stand, nothing else. And that's how we were transported from one place to another if needed. That's my father, 4 months after he was liberated. How he survived and how I survived, I still have no answer to that. We were in the right moment, in the right place. That was about the only answer I can give. But my dad survived. He was a manufacturer at one time, a vibrant guy in the city, and had problems, heart sickness, a short leg, but he made it. Thank God for that. He died about 25 years ago. Yes, that was me, and the number that was tattooed into my arm, it's still here. It didn't fade all the way. It's just that my skin is a little damaged from the sun and from the years that I played golf and tennis and so forth. That was a better time. But I wanted to show the pictures of the way we looked when we were liberated. Oh. Well, still my family. In the good old days, well, the good old days are now here. But anyway, when you see the pictures, you'll recognize them. Because that's what we looked like at the moment of liberation. And these pictures are the least offensive ones I dare show to students in my audience. The stench of dead bodies piled one on top of the other is not visible, but it permeated the air. And anyone who ever got a whiff of it will never forget it. These pictures showed the world what had taken place on the other side of the walls and barbed wire fences. They display the depth of immorality to which an entire nation could be led by its leaders. To a third world country. No, no, no. A nation previously by the world for its culture, its intelligence, its scientific accomplishments. How did the Holocaust come about? What must we watch for to prevent a similar, a massive tragedy from ever happening again? Today, I'm 1 month short of my 96th birthday. I had never even dreamt to reach this age, much less to speak about the Holocaust. It is a promise I made to myself and my murdered family and friends, and with the help of the Almighty, I will speak about the Holocaust with my last breath, because there must never be another such event. And I really don't care where and what. Never must there be such another event. I was born in Berlin, 1922. My father, a manufacturer of men's clothing, and we lived in a beautiful and comfortable apartment right in the heart of the city. At one end of our block was a playground for all children to enjoy. Jewish, Protestant, Catholic, who cared? It didn't matter. We played together, liked each other, and as we got older, we became good friends. On the other end of our block was a bar, which became a gathering place for Hitler's stormtroopers. And from our balcony, we could see the supporters grow in numbers and watch the demonstration. Die Juden sind unser Unglück. The Jews are our misfortune. This kind and similar slogans were shouted all day long. And I began to realize that the approach to dealing with Germany's economic woes after the losses in World War I was to blame someone else instead of finding a scapegoat. And second, the more times a lie would be repeated, the more likely it would be accepted. The fact that the Kaiser wanted a war to create colonies in Africa to support the German lifestyle, actions which England and France had taken earlier, but that fact was completely forgotten. In the years after World War I, more than 25 parties covering the entire political spectrum from right to left were unable to form a stable government and bring law, order, and prosperity back to Germany. One election rapidly followed another. Effective propaganda made it impossible for any one party to obtain a majority. Old President Paul von Hindenburg grew tired of such an unstable situation, and due to the increasing popularity of Adolf Hitler, a charismatic orator, he had little choice but to appoint him Reichschancellor and form a new government. However, Hitler immediately did what no other Reichschancellor before him did do. No sooner was he sworn into office than he ordered the arrest of all leaders of opposition parties and sent them into a hastily organized concentration camp. Next, he arranged for having someone to burn down the Reichstag building, a structure of similar importance as the U.S. Capitol building in Washington that houses our Congress. With opposition leaders behind bars and the Reichstag out of commission, Hitler now ruled by decree. By a stroke of a pen, our civil rights, our dignity was taken from us. Dogs and Jews not welcome here. Those were the signs now displayed at the entrances of restaurants, movie houses, and other establishments, places we visited often. How would you feel? How would you react if you went to your favorite restaurant, a place you felt at home, and the owner with whom you have exchanged pleasantries for years came to greet you, shrugging his shoulders with his hands pointing to the sky, like saying, "I'm helpless, sorry." Doesn't that make you feel really good? In 1934, Hitler called the Nazi Party members for a gathering in Nuremberg. And oh my God, what a display it had turned out to be. The city was covered with Nazi flags, and uniformed Hitler youth marched to the sound of marching bands. Pa, pa. They loved it. Uniformed girls danced in the streets. It was a holiday like no other. It was a perfect background to publish the Nuremberg Laws, as they became known. These laws were used to keep Hitler's promise to take Jewish possessions and give them to the non-Jewish German community, basically legalizing robbery. In addition, German Jews were no longer considered Germans. Marriage to a true German was prohibited. No Jewish doctor was permitted to treat a German patient. No Jewish teacher was permitted to teach in German schools. No Jewish judge, if there were any, was permitted to sit on the bench. Jewish lawyers were not permitted to present the case in German courts, and more and more and more of the same. And based on these new laws, I was called to my principal's school office one day. And there, Professor Dr. Dickhoff handed me an envelope addressed to my parents. The note inside simply said that I was no longer permitted to come to the gymnasium, the name for a German high school, a 9-year program that ends in the university. Can you imagine being told you were no longer welcome at your school? I had only one choice: to enroll in a high school that was operated by the Jewish community in Berlin. The building, the classroom, was built to accommodate 25 to 30 students, ideally. But we became 48 students in my class. Now, can you imagine the overcrowded conditions? But we had one fortunate break. Our teachers were the ones who were let go from German schools of higher education, and we addressed them with their titles, professor or doctor. They tried to put as much knowledge into our little heads as they could. They prepared us for all eventualities. Oh my God, we hated them for taking away the little free time we still had. But there came a time when I praised them for what they did, which helped me to overcome some of the difficulties that were still ahead of me. One Friday morning, October 28, 1938, our front doorbell to the house rang. And as always, my mother answered the door, expecting the girl who delivered the milk and rolls for the day, collected the money for the prior week, and takes the order for the next week. Strange, I thought, when instead of the girl's voice, I heard a man's voice. I opened my door leading to the foyer, and there was my mother, ashen white, speaking to a police officer. Upon seeing me, the policeman said, "Oh, you must be Johannes Bachner." And I said, "No." I got my passport and showed him my papers, which read, James Bachner. I am not Johannes. Well, he said that I'll have to go back and get corrected papers. The lieutenant has questions for you and your father and asked me to escort you to our station. I told him bluntly, don't bother coming back because I would not be here. And at that time, I grabbed the suitcase out of the closet, and he had an understanding smirk on his face. Soon my mother reappeared and put some money into my pocket. "Get out here fast," she whispered. "We'll meet at Uncle Robert's home. Dad had just left the apartment via our service entrance. Okay. We met again at my uncle's home. And since the two of us had just escaped police arrest, staying in the city was not safe. So we decided it was best for us to escape to Poland in an area next to the border where some of our family came from. Dad's mother and two brothers still lived there. So we went to a country where the language was strange to us, to me for sure, and so were their customs. I couldn't even find a book at the local library to read and further my education. It was an awful existence, no matter how much help and our love our relatives had for us. War between Germany and Poland was about to break out. But picture that. My mom and brother in Berlin. Dad and I on the other side of the front line. And war was ready to break out. It took a lot of time, 8 months, in fact, and a lot of money for our relatives to get us back together again. And that happened only 3 weeks before the war started. In blitzkrieg fashion, the little city we lived in was taken by Nazi army in only 3 days. And the following day, there were posters all over the city telling us all the do's and the don'ts. To begin with, we had to wear white armbands with the blue Star of David prominently displayed on the band. A few days passed, and the motorcycle squad rode into town one morning, parked in the marketplace, and began attacking every Jewish man who wore a beard. And that was most of them. They used scissors to remove their beards most of the time. But sometimes they just tore them right out of the skin, leaving the poor man crying and bleeding on the ground. And once their job was completed, terrorizing the community, they took their motorbikes and went to do the same in the next community. I watched these scenes while hiding in a doorway, and these pictures are still with me in my eyes. Wearing our white armbands with the blue Star of David, we were easily recognized at once. Every German soldier had the right to call, "Hey, Jew boy, come here and shine my shoes." One day, I was on a street, and the street was suddenly closed. A truck came with stormtroopers, and I, along with any able-bodied male wearing the armband, was arrested, placed on the truck, and taken to the high school building in town. From there, we were marched to the railroad station, placed on a train that was waiting for us. The doors were locked. We were suddenly guarded by brown uniformed stormtroopers, and after half a day's ride, we arrived in Germany, a town called Gogolin in Upper Silesia. And as the doors were unlocked, we were surrounded by more stormtroopers with guns drawn and treated like the worst criminals on earth. A soldier on the left of every WWII and another on the right side. We were taken to a nearby prison camp. But why? What the heck did I do? According to the laws, since I am a Jew, I am one of the worst criminals on earth. So said Adolf Hitler. We had done nothing wrong. But this prison camp was to be our new home. This was to be the first of many forced labor camps, concentration camps I would be at. In the morning, long before dawn, we had to get up, get in line, and march to a site that was to become a section of the new Autobahn between Breslau and Krakow. We were led to a site that had narrow spur railroad tracks and a train of lorries waiting for us. I was detailed to a group filling these lorries with sand, which when filled were hauled away with a small spur locomotive and emptied at a lower level area. It was a back-breaking job all day long, shoveling the sand into the snow. And there was train after train after train of lorries and on, all day long. Guards were watching and hitting us with bullwhips or rifle butts to edge us on when they thought that we had slowed down in our activity. Oh, I quickly learned how to work with both the shovel and my eyes. I was watching the guards and resting briefly when his eyes were not on me. Well, while still inside the school building, we were told what to expect. We had to complete the section assigned to us, and after completion, we would be sent home. We were to have mail privileges, once weekly a card sent to our home, and another one from home. After deduction for room and board, we were to be paid 1.5 German mark per day. And that was laughable at best. Neither my family nor I ever received a penny, let alone a Deutsche Mark. The mail service promised to us lasted a half a year, enough time to get mail from home telling us about raids that had taken place in town and the names of people who were taken and never heard from. The work we had to do was difficult, but all in our group were strong and able bodies to do what was demanded. Well, the food we got was certainly not anything like home-cooked food, but we didn't gain any weight, but it wasn't for starving us either. The project had come to an end after a few months, but instead of sending us home, as promised, we were moved to another section, and again to another section, and another section. Our mail privileges were suddenly halted, so we were no longer had a clue of what was going on in the outside world, or what was happening to our loved ones in our homes. Who was taken to where in a raid, and who had been killed when and where. At any rate, with all the things going on at home, we may not have any family left to come back home to. And during the spring of 1943, we heard rumors about an uprising that was taking place in the ghetto of Warsaw, where the remnants of the Jewish community fought the Nazis' army courageously for 4 weeks. But in the end, the community was completely destroyed. It was burned out. And I'll come back to that later. One morning, we woke up and found our camp, some 600 inmates, surrounded by black uniformed stormtroopers, Hitler's personal army. The camp commander personally conducted roll call, and at the end, he informed us that we were moving to a new camp. Don't take anything with you, was the order. Trucks will come and move all your personal belongings to where you are going to be. And 5 abreast, lined up once again with stormtroopers and their sidearms mounted, we passed the road signs on the corner of the road, and one of the towns listed was Auschwitz, 25 kilometers. No one needed to tell us where we are going. We started singing defiantly, maybe, but as if to confirm our thoughts. One of the guards said, "Go on, sing. Tomorrow you won't." It was evening when we passed the welcome sign. You may have seen pictures of it. Arbeit macht frei. Work gives you freedom. And at that moment, the capos took over. Who are the capos? The capos were a group of professional criminals who were assembled from the harshest prisons in Germany to assist the stormtroopers. No, they had no guns, but they had bats and bullwhips to help the stormtroopers. Lie down on the ground, and not a peep of you guys. And they used their weapons to make the point. And before dawn, we had to get up, go outside and stand at attention. Again, 5 abreast. And at long, long last, a stormtrooper officer arrived, and in cheerful conversation with his girlfriend officer, they talked about the night prior night's party. They stood near me, close enough for me to understand every word they said in German. Well, I can tell you, they had a good time. We were standing 5 abreast at attention. And don't you move a bit. He watched us run in line of 5. And one line after the other passed to his side, not looking at us at all. But he waved his finger, left, right, left, right, left, right. And there was a capo at the end of the path we had run. He grabbed my arm and pushed me through a barrack door on my right. And before I knew it, somebody else took my left forearm and tattooed these numbers into my skin. And as he was doing so, he whispered, "Look through the windows over my shoulder. Look at your comrades on the truck. Look at them carefully, because this is the last time you will see them alive." The truck is headed for the gas chambers and crematorium. And to this day, to this moment, I do not know what made this capo push me to the right and not onto the truck. I was told to undress and leave everything right where I stood. My clothing, my watch, everything. Every hair on my body was shaven off, and every cavity was looked into. A quick shower and a blue-gray striped uniform completed the change. I was a concentration camp prisoner now. It wasn't the uniform, but rather the wooden shoes that gave me the most trouble. No flexibility, and as I walked on the snow under my plain wooden soles, they caused me to lose my balance because one layer of snow over the next, I was walking on stilts, and it became the source for multiple hits with a bullwhip. "Get up and run to catch up with your group." That was the order shouted at me, and of course accompanied by strikes from the bullwhip, who make me fall repeatedly. Exhausted, I finally caught up with my group as we were ordered to enter the barrack and find some open space on the platforms to lie down and rest. I am sure you have seen pictures and read details about what happened at Auschwitz, and there is no need for me to repeat the horrors, the plain and unbelievable depth of immorality and inhumanity we were subjected to. Countless times we had selections in the sub-camps that we had been taken to, replacing inmates who were no longer able to stand straight or control themselves. Poor nourishment, hard work, and constant beatings were the reason for their condition. And the weak people were taken to the gas chamber. But there were rumors at one time that the next selection would be looking for healthy individuals. And this transport would be taking people away from Auschwitz, from the Auschwitz hellhole. Up to now, up to that point, my strength had been waning, and there was no light at the end of the tunnel. It was gone. I had begun losing hope, and thoughts of touching the electrified fence entered my mind. Though I had done all I could to avoid earlier selections, I did the opposite now. And by God, it worked. I was selected, and the rumor had proven to be true. I was given a shower, a new uniform, and my optimism returned, and suddenly there was a light at the end of the tunnel. More of the same. We had arrived in Warsaw, and the order was cleaning up the former ghetto, the ghetto that had been burned down, every home, every building, every corner. There was blood in the streets, still visible, and we arrived there to clean it all up, to make a park. We had to remove with bare hands at times the frozen remnants of walls that were left standing after the ghetto was burned down to end the early uprising of Jewish heroes and remove the remnants of all Jewish belongings. Now, I could go on for hours or even days to tell the unbelievable details we are forced to endure. And I'm referring to individual punishments too cruel for me to repeat to any audience, especially in front of youngsters. I will spare you these details. But I want you all to remember that it happened. I lived through it. Many in my family were murdered, including my own mother, my grandparents, and family members. But my dad, my brother, and I survived miraculously. My story is exceptional in the twists and turns and horrors that I faced. But so too the stories of all Holocaust survivors, each with their own personal version of events that I just described. And I believe at this time, in this point in time, there are not many like myself who spent 4.5 years in camps under the worst conditions one can expect. I may be one of a very, very few that may be still alive. Recalling the horror of Nazi terror and the millions of victims who died in a senseless war of hate and destruction. It is important because we don't want to see similar tragedy happen again. 6 million Jews were murdered, not because they were criminals, but simply because of our religion. So what were the lessons that we had to learn? Don't be a bystander. Stand up to injustice. Stand up to evil because it thrives in a vacuum. We must not be afraid to speak up when we see wrong, especially from political leaders. Watch for the warning signs of systematic discrimination, racial violence, and at last, genocide. I am a survivor of the worst genocide in world history, the Holocaust. But unfortunately, it may not have been the last one. We must teach our children about these horrific times in human history, learn from them, or our children will be condemned to repeat them. The memories of the Holocaust must not be forgotten, and the lessons learned must be implemented. We are here to love, to learn, to help, and respect each other, not to destroy and hate. And that's what our martyrs have given their lives for. Thank you for your kind attention. Now, if anyone would like to learn more about my experiences, because the details I did not speak about, I have written all my memories in here from my childhood to the moment of liberation. If anybody is interested, it's available for purchase here or even through the internet. And I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have at this point.
Excellent. So we have members of our staff who have microphones throughout the audience. So if you have a question, please raise your hand nice and high so somebody can come to you. Would you like some water while we...
Thank you.
Yes.
Hi, thank you for speaking.
I have a question over here.
I have a question. How did the Holocaust and surviving it affect your faith in Judaism?
How did the Holocaust affect?
Your faith in Judaism, your religion.
I don't understand the word.
So how did it impact your faith?
How did the Holocaust impact my faith?
Faith. Your faith.
Hmm?
Your religion.
Your faith. Your faith.
My faith.
Faith, yes.
Yeah. Well, let me tell you, I was brought up in a modern Orthodox home, and I loved it. I loved the community that I lived in. We were Jewish, yes. We observed the Jewish holidays. In fact, in later years, after I came out of camp, I had joined a community in Long Island, New York. We had 150 family members, and I became president of that group because I believe in the informality, the friendliness, to have something that is part of me where I was part of it. And yes, I believe in the Jewish community. As far as my faith is concerned, I have questions that no one can answer. So let's leave it at that. Yes?
Looks like we have a...
How did you reunite with your father and your brother?
How did I what?
Reunite with your father and your brother?
How did you find?
I could.
So how did you re-find your father and brother at the end of the war?
Oh, how did I re-find? There's again, it happened to me. It's, I don't know how, why. About 2 months before the liberation, we were told, I was working in a subcamp of Dachau, building an underground facility that was never completed. But one day we were told to make room for 500 or so people coming to us from other camps. And it was custom, when we see new people coming in, we are going up to the gate to have a look at who is coming, what do they look like. Maybe there's anybody that can tell me something about my family or friends. I had done the night shift, and I was there when they marched in. They were lined up and counted again for the umpteenth time. And I'm standing there looking for someone that I might know. And I was looking at the back of the people as they were being counted, and there was a face that did look familiar to me. Gosh, where do I know it from? And suddenly I said, Fred? No answer. I decided to say it a little louder. Fred? Fred turned around. Oh, God, my brother. Here is my brother, alive, standing before me, and I can help him. He had marched out of Auschwitz, one of the last groups to march out of Auschwitz, all the way, some 700, 800 miles, to arrive at my camp. Snow, cold, rain, wind, outdoors all the time. He has marched for about 3 to 4 weeks, arriving in my camp. Well, I was able to help him to get back on his feet, to restore his health, and together we escaped from the train that was supposed to have taken us to the center of Auschwitz, of Dachau, for the final solution. But the train never left the place that we got on because all the railroad and all transportation was completely halted, rails destroyed, roads destroyed, and there we were. And at the moment when we saw American flyers bomb the area, the guards, who were old men and afraid of us, maybe more so than we were of them, came out and said, wave your jackets, let them see the uniforms, that this train is filled with prisoners. It worked. The plane was not bombed, but that gave me and my brother enough time to get under the wagons to the other side of the train and right into the forests, where we spent about 10 days before we saw liberation. Okay?
Thank you so much for being with us today. We really appreciate it, and you're an inspiration to all of us. So thank you from everyone here. If there was one piece of knowledge that you could share with all of the future generations of the human race, what would it be?
Thank you for the question.
So the question, if you had one piece of knowledge to share with the future of humankind, what would you share?
One piece of knowledge to share. I had mentioned it before. Watch out. Watch for the bullies in your classrooms. Watch for your leaders. Don't let them do the things they are doing unless they're for the good of the community, where everybody can be happy and satisfied with, not just one group. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to go up in the balcony, and then we'll come back down here.
Hi, do you have any remaining anger towards the German people?
Do I have?
So do you continue to hold on to anger towards the Germans?
Do I hold on to anger to the Germans? Well, when I see and I come across someone my age, my first question, what the heck did you do at that time? I know there wasn't a German around at my age. There isn't one around at my age that was not involved in Nazism. In one way or another, they did do nothing to prevent it. Yes, I am angry at those, but their children didn't do anything, and I have no anger at them. No. I have met young people from Germany. I have been in contact with a group of students in Berlin, and friendly, nice. They all speak English, by the way, so there was no problem communicating. But no, I don't have any anger with them because they didn't do anything. Yes, there are still a small group of idiots around. We can't help that. Not yet. Time will come, as long as we are watching, that these people don't get a chance to raise their hands. And as long as we're watching, there will never be another Holocaust. And that's what I'm trying to tell you. Our children, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren must never experience anything that is like a Holocaust. I'm disturbed, and I come into the street and I read a paper. There's a Sudan. There are other places in the world where people are still trying to become another kind of Hitler. Don't let that happen. You have to watch it.
Thank you. I think we have a question right down here.
As a result of all that you experienced both during and since the Holocaust and know about this world, are you optimistic about the future?
I still don't understand.
So, so as a result of your experiences, you still have optimism about the future?
Oh God, yes. Yes. All we have to do is accept the people standing next to me. Be nice, be pleasant, be good. That's what I was talking about. We cannot live by hate and destruction. We are here to build, to live, to learn, to love, and be nice and have respect to anyone. I don't care. They're people. I respect them for what they have done, for what they have achieved. And I expect them to do the same to me, to respect me for what I am, for what I have done, for what I am doing. And follow me if you can. That's nice. Thank you.
Then we have a question, another question up top.
When you were alone in the concentration camps, what was going through your head about your family?
I don't know, my ears are giving out on me.
Oh, sure. So when you were in the concentration camps and you were alone, what sorts of thoughts about your family were going through your head?
Thoughts of family. I knew that most likely all of them had gone in one way or another on a raid and eventually wound up in one of the gas chambers of Auschwitz or other places, and they had been killed, that I stand alone. Yes, that was my thought, that my family is all gone. I have no one to come back home to. As I said, I found my brother, and about 6 months later, I was working for the American Joint Distribution Committee in Munich. My point was to work on immigration for all those that had family overseas to get them back together with their families. That was my job. Yes. And by that, all of a sudden, one day a friend of mine comes running into the room because I was the only one that had a telephone that went directly to the main office in Paris, and I was in communication. The Süddeutsche Zeitung, the biggest newspaper in Bavaria, had just appeared and had a column that read, "Friends and family from Germany, from Berlin, sending regards to their friends and family." And he comes in with one sheet of paper. "Jim, look at this." And there was a thing that says, "Abraham Bachner, sending regards to James and Fred Bachner." Oh my God, my father! I have to go and see him. He is in Berlin. Oh. I started and I prepared myself with all kinds of papers to come to the Russian area of occupation, because Germany was divided into three different parts of separation. And I had to go from the American zone through the Russian zone to Berlin. I got myself all kinds of papers. That wasn't worth anything, because as soon as I crossed the border, I was arrested. I spent a week in jail, but that's okay. I met eventually my father. There he was. And how did you make it? And how did you know that I am in Munich? Well, it'll be discussed quickly. He said, the Jewish Community Center had just opened, and he went to speak to one of the persons there. And as he left the interview, the guy that he spoke to came running after him. "Oh, Mr. Bachner, you left this on my desk, piece of paper." My father took it and he says, "Fine." And while all this happened in the corridor of the waiting room, someone was there and he says, "Mr. Bachner," I said, "Your name?" "Yes." "Do you know James or Fred Bachner?" He says, "My sons, what do you know about them?" "They are fine, they are alive, they are in Munich." "Really?" So the newspaper had just started, the newspaper from Munich had just had a little office in Berlin, and my father went to the office immediately and put this little notice in there. "Abraham Bachner sends regards to James and Fred." But, so I came. "Dad, how did you know where we are?" He says, "Well, when I was at the Jewish Center, I met this fellow, and he told me that you are in Munich. I sent this note." And he says, "That's very interesting." He says, "What did he tell you?" He says, "That you are in Munich, alive and fine." He says he was right. And he was a friend of mine with whom I have spent many years in camp. He too survived. And I said, "He told you where I am." "Yeah." "So here you are. So what are you going to do?" Well, I must tell you, my first thoughts after liberation was to go to Palestine at the time. I was ready to be a pioneer. But when I saw my father and the condition that he was in, he was no pioneer. He couldn't do that. And we had to change our mind. And since I was at the gate of immigration, and President Truman at the time said there are 26,000 quotas that were not used during the war. Let's use those for the people that can come to the United States. And I was one of the first to take this opportunity and use a quota that President Truman had offered me. And I came to the United States. And the rest is history. I married, I met a lovely girl. Here she is. Soon it'll be 63 years of yesterday. Remember those words, kids? Yes, dear. Very important. And we had two wonderful sons. One is sitting here. The other one is in Atlanta. Both of them orthopedic surgeons. They had no choice. Because I wanted to be a doctor, but I could. But I couldn't because of the camps. But when I saw their handwriting, I said, kids, you only have one choice. Either you learn how to write normally so anybody can read it, or you become a doctor. They did. My lovely daughter-in-law is sitting right next to him. And she is the one that was very much involved in my being here with details and so forth. And that's nice. And he too has two sons. My brother has three girls. One of them is going into medicine now. And two sons, beautiful grandchildren, and their girlfriends. Why not? I was born too soon. Anyway, God gave me all that. I have a beautiful family, a family filled with love, concern, happiness, and just wonderful. God could not have been better to me than he was, except for the 4.5 years where I suffered and suffered, but did live through it.
Mr. Bachner, on behalf of all of us here, we want to say thank you so much for sharing your story, for your strength, for your courage, for your wisdom, and these many decades later, coming to share the love you have for your family and your powerful story with all of us here in the audience. In just a minute, we're going to give one final round of applause, but I do want to invite anyone up to come. He's going to do a book signing upstairs in just a moment.
Okay.
But please join me in thanking him one final time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.